Hello everyone. In the last video, we have discussed what exactly happens when a function is invoked. Now this is the right time to discuss about this variable in JavaScript. Okay, so you can see this function here is a simple function and we are trying to log the value of this inside. So what happens if you call the greet function here? So let me call greet and let's check the value of this. You can see that this gives undefined. Okay, now let me create an object. So I have created a user object which have two properties, name and greet. So name is John and greet, the value is the greet function. So this we can simply write like this because the property and the value are same name. So we can simply use like this. Okay, now let me try to invoke this function using the user object. So user dot greet. Okay, so again the same function is invoked. Now let me comment this one, save this, and now you can see that as the value of this, an object is printed. The object have greet and a name of John. Greet is a function. So what is this object? This object is the same user object. Okay, and let's do one more thing. Let me comment this. This time I'm creating a variable fn and I'm extracting the value of the greet field from this user object. So user.greet is extracted. Now the value of user.greet is stored into this fn variable and I'm trying to invoke the function using the fn variable. Okay, now fn points to user.greet and user.greet points to the greet function. Okay, so the same function. Now I'm saving this. Now again we got undefined. So in the first case and last case we got undefined, but when we called the greet method using the user object, we got the this as the user object. Okay, so what does this say? What is this? So this determines the context, okay, or which object was part of the function call. So if you see the first statement here, okay, so the function is invoked, but there is no object associated with the function call. Okay, so this becomes undefined. Now in the second case, we are invoking user.greet. Okay, so the function call, the greet function call is associated with an object user. So this becomes the user. Now even in the final case, even though we are extracting the value from the user object, at the time of invocation, you can see that there is no object associated with the function call. So this again is undefined. Okay, now let's check another example. So here again, the user object, but this time I have defined the function inside the object. So the user object have two properties, name and greet, and the value of greet is a function. And inside the function body, we are trying to access the name field of this variable. Okay, now again, if you call user.greet like this, so the function call, so user object have a greet field and we are invoking it. So there is an object associated with the function call and that object will be this. Okay, and it is accessing name field. So this here becomes this user object and the name field is John. So when we call user.greet, it will print John. So let me save this. You can see that John is printed. Okay, so there is a misconception that we got the value of user as the value of this because we defined the function inside the object. but that is not the case. The value of this is determined when the function is invoked, and it is determined by which object was part of the function call. So in this particular case, we got user because user object was part of this function call. So for example, I'm creating another object. Okay, here I have created another user object, and this time name is Frank, and there also I have given a greet field, and this time the value of the greet field is extracted from user.greet. So both this object points to the same function, but this function is defined inside user. Now let me comment user.greet here, and here I'm calling another user.greet. Okay, so both are points to the same function. Now let's see what this here. If you save this time we get Frank. Why? Because so here you can see that another user is the object which is associated with the function call. So this points to this field and its value is user.greet. So this function, and inside this, which is the base object. So here another user. So another user dot name, which is Frank. So that's why we get Frank here. Okay. So this is how the value of this is determined. But under the hood, there is more to it. So the JavaScript engine uses something called a reference record to determine the value of this. So let's try to understand what is a reference record. So whenever JavaScript come across statements like this, it needs to evaluate to a value. Along with its raw value, it also creates a record under the hood, so which is an internal record. So that is called a reference record. Okay, and the reference record mainly contains two values. One is the base, and second one is the reference name. The reference name. So if you see this statement, so here uh, the base is determined by a question: is it a property reference? Okay, so you can see that greet is actually a property of an object, right? So is it a property reference? Yes, it is true. So if it is a property reference, then base becomes the object. Okay, so here in this case, the base become user. Now, what is the reference name? Greet. So reference name become greet. So we are trying to find the value of greet. See that we are not invoking it, we are just getting the value. So when JavaScript executes this, first it checks, is it a property reference? So yes, then what is the object? That will become the base. And the reference name is greet here in this case. Okay. Now, when the function is invoked, so in this case, if you add a pair of parentheses, the engine uses the reference record to determine the value of this. Okay. So if it is a property reference, then the value of this will be the value of base inside the reference record. So the value of base inside the reference record is user. So this points to user. So that is how we got user object here when we call greet. Okay. Similarly, so here let's create the other case fn and user.greet. Okay. And we are calling fn here. Now in this particular case, so first fn. So let's don't call it, just give fn. Okay. So first JavaScript need to determine the value of fn. So at this time, a reference record is created. Now, the first question is fn is a part of an object, which means, is it an object reference? Is it a property reference? No. So this is not a property reference. So the base becomes an environment record. Okay. because there is no object associated with it. So this is just the environment record where the function is actually defined. Now, what will be the reference name? Here in this case, fn. Okay. Now, when we invoke it, okay, again, is it a property reference? No. If it is not a property reference, then the value of this will be undefined. Okay, it won't use the value of base. So that's why when you call fn, the value of this become undefined. So in this case, when this become undefined, there is no property. So it will throw an error. Okay. So conceptually, this is reference record, and JavaScript uses a reference record to determine the value of this. Okay. Now there are some cases that we have to check. So user.greet, and I'm calling it. Now we will get the value John here. Now what happens if you add a pair of parentheses like this? Okay. So this time also we get the John, because when we call user.greet here, so when JavaScript evaluates the value of user.greet, again, the reference record is created, and this is a property reference. So base become user, and name become reference name become greet. Now, when you add this parenthesis, nothing changes here. Okay, so adding this parenthesis will not destroy the reference record, and the function is immediately invoked. So when this is invoked, it still uses this reference record, and since it's a property reference, the value of this is the value of base, which is user. So user.name John. Okay, now there is another case. Hmm, fn. Okay, so this time inside the parenthesis we have an assignment expression. Okay, and we are calling the return value of this expression. Okay, now if you save it and if you see the output, you get a reference error, cannot read properties of undefined, which means we again get this as undefined. Okay, now let's understand what happens here. So this is an assignment expression, which means first it needs to determine the value of the right side. Okay, so first JavaScript evaluates this, and it again creates a reference record with the base as user, as this is a property reference, and name, reference name as greet. Okay, that's fine. Now the assignment operator internally calls a function get value. So it only gets the value of it. Okay, which means here it the assignment operator only gets the object reference of the function. So we know that functions are also object. Okay, so when the assignment operator is used, it will not copy the reference record. It only copies the reference of the greet function. Okay, now that is the value which is returned from this expression. Now here fn is not called. Okay, fn is not at all invoked here. Here this expression returns the value of greet, and that value is being invoked. Okay, we are not invoking fn. Okay, so there is only one operation is happening. What is the value in the right side? The value in the right side is copied to the variable in the left side of the assignment operator, and the assignment expression have to return a value. The value returned by is the value at the right side, which is the reference of the greet function, but that reference does not include this reference record. So this is executed as a normal function. When this is executed as a normal function, which means it's not a property reference, this variable becomes undefined. So here this becomes undefined. So that's why we are getting an error. Again, there is a similar case. So user.greet, and this time we are using the or operator, user.greet. Okay. So what do you think? Um, what will be the output this time? So if you see again we got the same reference error, type error, cannot read properties of undefined reading name, which means again we got this as undefined. Now what happens here? So first we have to execute what is inside this parenthesis. Okay, so inside this parenthesis we have an or operator. Okay, so the or operator again internally calls get value of the first. So we have two of them, right? So first we need to get the value of this and then this. So if this is truthy, then the then this expression returns the first value. If the first one is falsy, then the expression returns the second value. So here also it internally uses a get value function. So this get value function will not return the reference record, which means when this is executed again, when JavaScript come across this, it creates the same reference record containing base as user and reference name as greet. But this or operator only extracts the value, which means the function object reference, not the reference record. Okay. Now the reference is truthy, so this is not executed. So we got the function reference outside, and that is invoked. Now again, there is no object. It is not a property reference. So this become undefined in this case as well. So the same happens with AND operator. So whenever an operator is used, it actually calls the get value, and the get value will not extract the reference record. It only gets the value of it, raw value of it. So this time user.greet, so it gets the reference, it is truthy. So it will check this one again, user.greet, which is again truthy. Now it returns that value and we are invoking it. Okay, but again, this is invoked as a normal function because we only have the raw value, we don't have the reference record. So again, this becomes undefined. So if you see, again, we got the reference error. Okay. So this is basically all about the value of this. Now, one thing we have to consider, whether the script is running in strict mode or sloppy mode or normal mode. Okay, you can clearly see that I use the string here, use strict, converting this into a strict mode script, right? So if I just comment this, now this is executed as a normal mode. Now let me start with our first example. So function greet and console.log this. Okay, now let me call greet. So when it was strict mode, we got this as undefined. So why we got undefined? So when we call greet here, first it checks, first it needs to determine the value before invoking it. So it creates a reference record, right? Now, the first question is it a property reference? No. Then what will be the base? It will be the environment record. Okay. And what is the reference name here? Greet. Okay. Now the function is invoked. So since it's not a property reference, the value of this will be undefined. Undefined. Okay. That's why we got undefined earlier. Now the thing is, this is not running in strict mode. Okay. So if you see, we get window object, which is the global object of the browser, right? So if it is not strict mode, we got window. So what happens in normal mode is that, or sloppy mode is that, in sloppy mode as well, this is determined as undefined because that's the rule, right? There is no object is associated with it. But in sloppy mode, when the base is environment record, which means there is no object associated with, JavaScript assigns the global this. Okay, global this. So global this points to the global object where the JavaScript is running. So in this particular case, this script is running in the browser. So the global object is the window. So in sloppy mode, if a function call is not associated with any object, then the value of this will be window. Okay, but the strict mode is more correct, so that's why we use strict mode more. Okay, and another case is that um, about modules. So here you can see that I have attached this JavaScript file as a normal script, but if you change this type to module, so this become a module, and JavaScript modules by default runs in strict mode. So even though we are not using use strict here, so this time again if you see, the value become undefined. Okay, because um, modules are always ran in strict mode. So let's summarize what we have gone through in this video. So we have when we call a function without any object associated with this, in strict mode we get the value of this as undefined, but in sloppy mode, since so what you can check is that whenever the value of this is undefined in strict mode, in sloppy mode it will be the global object. So here in this case, since there is no context, so this determines the context of the function call. Since there is no context or no object associated with this, in strict mode it will be undefined. In sloppy mode, there is a conversion happens internally, and it change it from undefined to the global this, which means the window in case of browser. Okay, now user.greet. So here clearly we have an object associated with the function call. So in strict mode, we get user object as this. In sloppy mode also, same, there is no rule change. Okay, so in this time, we have an assignment expression. Okay, so here clearly fn is not invoked. Here this expression evaluates to a value, and that value is the value of the greet function, which does not include the reference record, even though we are referring greet using an object. So the plain function is invoked, so this will be undefined. But in this case, sloppy mode, this will be global this. And user.greet or user.greet. So here also we are using the OR operator, which extracts the raw value, but it will not extract the reference record. So again, this will be undefined. In sloppy mode, it will be window. Okay, now in the coming videos, we will be looking at what happens if you use arrow functions in all these scenarios. Okay, arrow functions are not just a syntactic sugar of the normal function keyword functions. There are some differences. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and thanks for watching.